Africa's elephants are again under siege, slaughtered in their hundreds of thousands. Like the rest of the continent's wildlife, targeted for a trade steeped in violence and greed.
These wildlife crises in Africa are wonderful examples of poor, rotten leadership.
The main question here is, are we really interested in saving elephants?
With poaching on the rise, their survival is under threat. And as the slaughter spreads from Central and East Africa into Southern and South Africa, conservationists warn of an ivory avalanche soaked in blood. The avalanche has arrived. The ivory trade has been banned since 1989, yet increasing demand keeps pushing up the price. In Asia, a kilogram of raw ivory now sells for well over $2,000, triple the amount of $750 per kilogram in 2010. And its use is purely decorative, for religious ornaments and mass-produced trinkets.
The newfound affluence of that's occurred in the last 2 decades has played a huge role in ramping up the demand in ivory. And it's one of the reasons, in fact, it's the primary reason for the surge in the poaching. There's the actual poaching component, or what takes place at the source. Then there's the middleman or transportation component. And then, of course, there's the retail market, which is in Asia mostly.
What makes the story so horrifying is the scale of the slaughter. In the last 3 years, over 100,000 elephants killed for this, ivory. And yet the elephant's tusk is just a tooth. It's an enlarged incisor, it's composed of dentine and surrounded by enamel. And yet this tooth is worth more today than diamonds and gold. South Africa has long been an elephant conservation stronghold. But in 2014, Sandparks reported the poaching of 2 elephants in the Kruger Park, the first incident in 10 years. It should be recalled that in 2007, only 13 rhinos were poached in South Africa. By 2014, that low number had increased to a staggering 1,215.
I think we'd be absolutely foolish to think that this poaching scourge is not going to move into South Africa. If you look at what's happened to rhino, and if you look at the trajectory that the poachers or the syndicates have taken through West, Central, East, and now moving south.
We have people coming from Tanzania. We have Somalians also coming from Tanzania. What they do, they give weapons to the Mozambican poachers, or they poach by themselves.
Estacio Valoy is an investigative journalist in Mozambique. He has extensively researched poaching, particularly in the remote northern region. There, he focused on 2 reserves, Niassa, where the elephant population has shrunk from over 20,000 in 2009 to 13,000 in 2013, and in Kwirimba Park, where the number of elephants has declined from 2,000 in 2008 to a mere 790 in 2014.
After they shoot or they kill an elephant, the ivory is taken back to Tanzania by 4 or 5 people, because the group is composed by 5 or 6 people. You might have 2 shooters, 3 people to carry the ivory, and 2 watchers. And usually these people are informed by community members or some scouts involved in poaching.
Valoy invited special assignment to Cabo Delgado and Niassa to investigate the ivory supply chain. We wanted to learn more about the sources of poaching and to explore ways of combating it. So in October 2014, special assignment flew to northern Mozambique for a 14-day investigation. We arrived in the town of Pemba during the build-up to Mozambique's general elections. Through Valoy, I had already made telephonic contact with a poaching middleman by the name of Peter. I had pretended to be a buyer. You've got good ivory there for me.
Yeah, even we got 20 kilo, 30 kilo you can find also. And people from here, they charge 6,000 a kilo, one kilo.
6,000 metica is equal to about $175. We needed to know more. Peter?
Yeah.
You live in Pemba or?
Yeah, I'm living in Pemba, of course.
Okay, so we go to Mueda just to look at...
To looking at those things or ivory.
Peter is taking us to Mueda, a town 270 kilometers north of Pemba. It is a frontier town with a thriving illicit trade in minerals, weapons, and of course ivory. We are navigated through the town to a traditional village on the outskirts. But when we arrive, we are told that the ivory isn't there and that the shooter has gone to the mountains outside Mueda.
Last year he went there, his father is sick, like a 6 case 1 year. So I was telling him, let's go and pick him up to this place, because we have been driving a long way.
Not a good start. SABC cameraman Sam Msibi warns of drawing attention to ourselves.
All these kids are having ears out, the elder people are having ears out. Somebody phoned the police or phoned something else. And we're shitting for nothing.
We set off on a rough mountain road surrounded by rocks and bush. We don't know who or what to expect in these mountains, but we don't find the shooter or the ivory. That night, Peter drops off a parcel. It contains a horn belonging to some animal, but not an elephant. The following morning, we ask permission to film it to verify its authenticity. He agrees, but tries to persuade us to buy it, saying we could get $100 per bracelet. Although he claims to be a seasoned ivory dealer, Peter is obviously a small-time opportunist trying to trick us. How many have you sold in your life? How many have you sold many? Eh? Then, at the worst possible moment, our car breaks down. We are in the mountains, stuck behind a police vehicle. Should they find our illegal cargo, we could be arrested on the spot. Fortunately, they simply offered to tow us into town.
If we're doing business in this way, we're in big trouble.
Back in Mueda, the poachers who had escorted us into the mountains try unsuccessfully to repair the car before abandoning the mission, never to be seen again. And we have to be towed back to Pemba by a bakkie with neither brake lights nor a windscreen. Not an impressive start to an investigation fraught with risk. We are in the village of Muaja in the Ankuaba district of Cabo Delgado, bordering the Karimba National Park. Like many reserves in Africa, there is a legacy here of displacement.
In forming those reserves, there was a massive forced removal of traditional communities out of those reserves. They had no say in the matter, and so not only were they removed from their traditional lands, but they were also then told they could no longer practice their traditional lifestyle. So it was a process of alienation and, of course, complete disempowerment, which equaled impoverishment.
The area is covered by walls of thorns and dense dry bush stretching 1,430 square kilometers. We are walking outside the park along the Montepuez riverbed. Estacio has organized former poachers and village elders to accompany us as scouts and for protection. This area is notorious for poaching and weapon smuggling.
They've been involved in these activities for a long time. I'm talking about more than 10 years. And as I remember, the last time they had weapons was like 2 months ago.
Although this is elephant terrain, we have yet to catch sight of this majestic beast. But we have clearly been spotted. From the hastily abandoned bike and helmet we stumble across, we've obviously disturbed someone here, possibly a poacher.
This is one of the epicenter of poaching activities, and basically, is the poacher is the center of the poacher as well. And if you talk about the Montepuez River, is the place where the information about helicopters landing here to transport ivory, and we had information about poachers being using heavy weapons like a PKK, like a K-47, and also rifles for poaching.
Estacio has brought us to a tobacco farm. At least on the surface, it resembles a typical tobacco farm, but in reality, it is a smokescreen for a more lucrative activity, poaching. The poachers are not hostile towards us, but do not want to be interviewed.
Here we have this camp. As you can see behind me, we have tobacco. These people, they live here, they are farming tobacco. But somehow they use these crops as a way of covering themselves. Because this is the place where they receive poachers, sometimes they hide weapons. And sometimes they do allow the poachers to come with weapons and shoot. They can climb the mountain or pick up a mobile phone, give a call to the guy who is coming for shooting. Or the poachers can even be hidden here now, we don't know, in the bush, so they can come back and keep tracking the elephants.
In this remote area, monitoring and policing poaching activity is extremely difficult.
You look to the scouts from Kimba Park. They have no radio transmitter. They rely on mobile phones. And they have to take these mobile phones to remote areas like this. They have to climb the mountain to give a call to their colleagues. And sometimes they're in areas where there's no mountain to climb. And if something happens, if they come across with the poachers, or poachers shooting or somebody is wounded, or if they are bitten by a snake or whatever, anything can happen in the bush.
After our unfortunate experience with Peter the poaching middleman, we are on the alert. There are dangers lurking here, and not only of the human kind. The attack is by an army of Matabele ants, armed with ferocious stings. They have marched up the pants of cameraman Sam, forcing him to strip. Further into the bush, we find the skeletons of several elephants, the bones of old and young alike.
This elephant was killed. Wasn't a normal dead. And according to the last information, last week about 3 or 4 poachers were here.
When elephants encroach on human settlements or display aggression, they are called problem elephants. But the lines between eliminating them for protection and killing them for profit are often blurred. In short, conflict between elephants and humans, the consequence of competition for habitat, is often used as a justification for poaching.
One species, humans, have been pushing further and further into these wilderness areas. And if you're going to fragment habitat and you're going to push ever closer up onto the boundaries of where you've got lions and elephants, you're going to have human-animal conflicts taking place.
We have several issues. Poverty, and the people also must be given a lecture example about the value of having an elephant in that area. To protect the elephant, this is not happening.
It's probably the greatest challenge that the conservation world in Africa faces. How to redress those imbalances that were created with all these people living around the edges of these wildlife reserves.
In the poaching hierarchy, the elephant shooter occupies the bottom rung, earning about $30 per elephant. But more often than not, the shooters are shortchanged. Ironically, in this multi-million-dollar industry, there are few wealthy poachers, that is, those who actually do the killing. They remain the poorest of the poor. Like Julian Antoni, an elderly man living in Muaja. Like many of the local poachers, he has a military background. He was a soldier who fought in the Mozambican War of Independence between Frelimo and Portugal. Today, this war veteran lives in abject poverty.
I was a military. I learned how to shoot doing the service.
During the War of Independence, during the Civil War, every national park and reserve was used as a pantry. The armies looted the wildlife stocks. And so what happened was that a lot of the villages and the communities living around those areas grew up with this example that was being set, is that wildlife is completely disposable.
But we receive.
After the independence, I was taught by a chief how to use the weapon exactly for poaching.
He says he was never paid for his shooting skills, even though park officials supplied him with the guns.
The kind of weapon was using was a Russian weapon, a mouse, and we received it from the administrator.
But there were also poaching experiences that went horribly wrong, like the time he tracked a matriarch elephant, only to discover, after he had shot her, that she had a calf suckling at her breast, so young that its tusks had not yet properly formed.
The baby was having milk, so the baby ended up dying. I am not happy, and I'm dealing with important people, they are chiefs. I couldn't even go there to face them and ask them to pay me for what I did, or to give me something as a result of the elephants I killed.
We have learned that another elephant has been killed in Muaja, the third in the last 48 hours. Sam and Estacio hitch a ride on a motorbike, pick up an eyewitness, and make their way to the scene of the slaughter. It is possible the killers stayed in the very camp we visited by the Montepuez River the day before, or are even members of the community. Was it a problem elephant, or was it poached? And how much does the eyewitness know? How much is he willing to tell?
I was in my farm and I saw them with the weapon, shooting the elephant.
It is a grisly sight. The tusks were first removed, then the flesh, and nothing remains of the carcass except blood and bones.
What would you expect when you've got tens of thousands, even millions of people who are living on the breadline, yet across the fence you've got all this protein running around?
We make contact with scouts from the Karimba Park Task Unit. They accompany us to inspect the carcass.
We are worried about this situation. In this year, 2014, we did register 10 elephants. This is another one, what means 11 elephants.
The scouts seem to be fighting a losing battle against the poaching.
At the moment, we have a 6 car. We're trying to patrol. It's a vast area. The Karimba National Park is a vast area, as I was saying, and now we're not able to cover all the area. While we're trying to chasing the poachers from one side, they go to the other side. The poachers were told by some community members that elephants were going to that side. The elephants even tried to run away from the poachers, going to the community's direction. But the community blocked the way, and they pushed the elephant back so they could go to an ambush. And after that, they could have a meet.
Only Mozambique's Provincial Department of Agriculture is authorized to deal with so-called problem elephants. But the Chief Secretary of Muaja says that the department is slow to respond, so the community has to deal with the problem itself.
We go there, we scream to the animals, or we take cans with us, we start kicking it. But we spoke with the people of the park. They came, but sometimes they delay. They take 3 days to come here to support us. That's the only point from where we received weapons. But of course, the weapons come with the people from the park, the rangers.
But even if the complaints against problem elephants are legitimate, what happens to the tusks once the elephant has been eliminated?
Não levam para eles.
After a problematic elephant is poached or is killed, all the ivory goes direct to the Kirimba National Park. We take all the ivory to the tourism department, and the tourism department has to deliver it to the government about where all these tasks are delivered, what is the hand of this task, what they do it final, I cannot tell you.
But it is difficult to keep tabs on the number of tusks handed in to the Mozambican authorities. As with the proliferation of weapons after Mozambique's independence and civil wars, what is apprehended is only the tip of the iceberg. And conservation is not high on the priority list of communities struggling to survive without electricity and water, without viable alternatives.
We're expecting to have a power installed here in our district last November. Unfortunately, until now, nothing happened. We submitted all the documents in 2010. We're facing problems of lack of water, lack of power, and it is becoming difficult for us to develop other kind of activities.
The government has allocated 20% of tax revenue earned from wildlife and forest concessions for conservation and rural development, but many communities say they have not received it.
This is not happening only with that community, it's also happening with other communities where natural resources have been exploited and the community have no benefit, they're not benefiting from this. We saw trucks carrying timbers, we saw people killing elephants, ivory, we saw minerals on the other side being taken. And if you ask government, where is this 20%, of course, they're going to tell you, yeah, we've been giving them this 20% all these years.
To date, we have learned that the poaching scourge is driven by 3 factors: poverty, conflict over habitat, and an insatiable demand for ivory.
But the fourth reason the poaching scourge is at the levels it is today is the complete and utter lack of political will to fight this crisis. Now, those factors come together, it leaves very little hope for a lot of these communities, and that's why they do turn to poaching.
It is dusk in the village of Muaja, and an hour ago another elephant was slaughtered. We go in search of the carcass, and we encounter a feeding frenzy in the belly of this beast, a mass of machetes, arms, hands and blood. There are many myths about Ndlovu, the African elephant, whose size and majesty makes it invincible, except to man's cruelty. In myths, it is the wise ancestral chief, in life deserving of respect, in death, dignity, and a burial befitting a chief.